This is Shlomo Swidler, CEO of Orchestratus, on Wednesday, April 23rd, 2014. Hi, this is Shlomo Swidler. Welcome to the OpenStack Israel podcast. My guest today is Ken Peppel, CTO and co-founder of Solinia and author of the O'Reilly book, Deploying OpenStack. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Thanks, Loma.
So what's Solinia?
Solinia is a software and services company that concentrates on open infrastructure. And so we work with customers specifically around OpenStack and some of the other cloud infrastructure to help them adopt that infrastructure into their enterprise.
And is it specifically OpenStack, or do you recommend other solutions when necessary?
Certainly. A lot of our customers are looking really to be able to do something higher in the stack, something closer to their business needs. So a lot of our customers come to us actually looking for, I want to be able to do some kind of big data. I want to be able to bring applications to market more quickly, or even I'd like to be able to do some kind of virtual desktop. And it just happens that probably some kind of cloud infrastructure, and that's usually OpenStack, is the right way to base that solution on.
So I'm going to ask you a question that might not be fair to ask you. How much of what you're seeing asked for can be done with OpenStack versus with other competing solutions?
So I think that's an interesting question. A lot of the solutions which are out there at the infrastructure as a service level, and I'm specifically talking about OpenStack and Cloudstack, vCloud, and probably Eucalyptus are kind of the four that are out there. A lot of them can handle most of it. So for example, when you talk about big data, you really need to be able to have obviously the compute side of it, but a lot of big data is really around block storage and actually object storage also, as well as some networking. And almost everybody has that within their infrastructure as a service solution. What most of them don't have is the variety of solutions that are available there. And so specifically, like when you talk about big data, that's really about what kind of block storage can I bring to bear to the solution. And sometimes it's you need massive amounts of it that's not very fast. Other times you need extremely fast. And that's where the larger ecosystem of OpenStack really shines in providing those. So it's not so much that they couldn't do them. They might not be able to do them as well, though.
So I've heard it said that Cloudstack may have more functional production deployments in the wild, but OpenStack has the lion's share of the ecosystem integrations. Would you say that's true?
I would say that's probably true. When you look at Cloudstack's deployments that are out there, it's really been picked up by a lot of what I call your tier 3 service providers. They're not the tier 1 service providers like a CSC or something like that that's huge, or an IBM Global Services. They're not even a tier 2 one, but a lot of the smaller tier 3 ones, which need pretty limited functionality. They're really providing something not much more than a virtual private server. A lot of them have picked it up. And with Cloudstack's limited functionality, that's probably a great thing for them. I think when you start looking at a tier 2 or a tier 3 provider, though, the stuff that Cloudstack provides you, which is really the basic compute, block storage, and networking, those are really hard to make money on. When you're competing against an Amazon Web Services at 10 cents an hour, you really need to be able to have differentiated services that can compete against the other Amazon Web Services where you can make money on, and it's not just a game of scale. And that's where I think Cloudstack may fall down, and that's why I think where you see most of the larger providers out there, the Rackspaces of the world and such, that's why they've embraced OpenStack.
And so in terms of Cloudstack versus OpenStack, if I could paraphrase you, I would say that Cloudstack has some successful deployments, but because it does not have the giant ecosystem behind it, it's falling behind in terms of higher level offerings that its customers can use to compete successfully against the major players.
Yeah, I think that'd be a fair assessment in the service provider market.
Let's take a look back at OpenStack for just a minute and who it appeals to. Up until Icehouse, which was just released, certain kinds of customers were looking for certain kinds of use cases, and OpenStack appealed to these guys? What kind of customer was attracted to OpenStack until now?
So I think you saw two or three different waves of users come onto OpenStack. So in the very early days, it was really service providers. And, if you were a service provider, not if you were, if you are a service provider, you're kind of having a near-death experience where you're seeing, basically a book provider as well as a search provider all of a sudden become your largest competitors.
Hmm.
And that's worrisome because they have scores and scores of software developers competing against yourself, which tends to be an operator. So early on, it was really service providers looking to be able to differentiate themselves and provide cloud services. I think as we moved into, say, the last year and a half, it's been a lot of people who really base their business on computing that have been adopting OpenStack. And so that's really been SaaS providers. And, it's been people like Workday and some other people out there that their whole business runs on computing and they need a real flexible compute layer to do that.
Hmm.
Today, as we start to move forward, though, I think we're going to start seeing a new class of customer. And even over the last 6 months to a year of the customers we worked with, we've started to actually see the enterprise pick this up for specific use cases that are out there.
And you're saying that these new Icehouse features will now increase the appeal to enterprise customers?
Yeah. And so a lot of the Icehouse features that you see that came out were really evolutions. They're not completely new features. It's really we've taken some of the sharp edges away from more problematic pieces, and we really make them more operational features for you, things that help you actually operate it better to a higher quality, which is really what a lot of the enterprise is looking for.
Give me an example of something that's made easier in terms of operations in Icehouse.
So, for example, one of the new services in Icehouse is called Trove. Trove gives you a database as a service. So with Trove, I can actually roll out uh, instances of MySQL or other databases, and I can actually manage those through Trove, being able to resize it, back it up, and things like that. As you know, in the enterprise, every application is backed with some kind of database there, and they have entire departments which do nothing but DBA work. This will help simplify some of that and really helps you operate your cloud instead of having to manage each database as a bespoke instance on top of an instance that's already on the cloud. This is going to help you simplify some of that.
Hmm.
In addition, some of the other features that we've added in, especially around the dashboard, making it much easier to use and more interactive, adding translations in, doing some of the new hypervisor work that supports some more interesting ways to use the scheduler. All of these features help satisfy some of the quality of service that enterprises really need.
A lot of these new improvements to the operational side are sanding down the corners that have up until now been rough edges.
Correct.
What makes you most excited about Icehouse?
So I think the things that I'm interested in Icehouse is we've finally got a lot of the core to be very stable. And a lot of the services and some of the new innovation that we're starting to see is really building on top of that to provide another layer or another level of both automation and value to the customer. The Trove database as a service that I talked about before is a great example of that. It's fixing a real need that the enterprise has, but it's building on top of what we already have. So for example, when it rolls out a database, that's an instance in OpenStack Compute. It's using storage from OpenStack Cinder, and some of it's actually being orchestrated for you through some of the other OpenStack tools. And
Hmm.
so once we've had this solid core, the ability to build on top of that, I think is extremely interesting, especially because it actually solves closer and closer to either IT or business problems.
You mentioned before that you're seeing a lot of customers ask for higher level solutions to answer provisioning problems or virtual desktop problems or big data problems. What kind of integration do you see going on between, for example, the Hadoop ecosystem and OpenStack code?
Yeah. So today, a lot of it's being done at kind of a solution level. I think when you look at Hortonworks and Cloudera, probably the two dominant distributions out there, they're doing a fair amount of work working with distros in the OpenStack community to make sure that at least they play well together today,
Hmm.
and at least we can put together some kind of solution around that. And so I'm interested at certainly that level of being able to provide the solutions together. But actually, they're actually contributing even more towards what we call an incubating project within OpenStack. We had a project that used to be called Savannah, which is now called Sahara.
Hmm.
It's an incubating project, which means it's not ready to be integrated into production yet, but we hope to have it integrated into production within the next 2 or 3 releases. And it's actually going to give you big data as a service. So something much closer to what AWS's Elastic MapReduce provides,
Hmm.
where it'll actually be able to provide Hadoop data processing as a service instead of having to do it just as a solution and putting that solution together yourself. So I like it working on two fronts, which is if you're already a Hortonworks or Cloudera person or using those distros today, people are making it easier and easier to run OpenStack underneath those solutions, but also building it in as a service so that for people that actually want to consume that as a service, they'll be able to do that also. And so I think that's extremely interesting. And that's really an outgrowth of having an extremely large and influential community for OpenStack.
And so, for example, if you would talk to an audience that is interested in big data solutions, how much work would you say has to be done in order to provide a kind of a turnkey solution that they might be looking for with today's version of OpenStack?
Well, so I think that's a timely question for us. So one of our customers actually is doing that today. And so we've just finished the pilot production for them. And over the last 3 months, we put together Cloudera along with their data scientist and ran that on top of a pilot OpenStack cloud. Today, we spent somewhere around 2 to 3 months putting that pilot together. Most of that really wasn't open infrastructure work. Most of that was actually, we were doing quite a bit of testing on OpenStack itself and a variety of different scenarios so that they would know which scenario was best for them to go to production with. And we were doing a lot of porting work to make sure what kind of performance we would actually need to do that. And so over 3 months, we've gotten to a place where they actually have a solution that they're going to move forward with, hopefully, here in a month or two, and move to production. So I think today you're actually seeing that a lot of the pieces are in place today. There's a fair amount of testing and performance tuning and things that you need to be able to put together. But it's something that's happening today and people are using today. I think over time that's going to become even easier. But today it's already happening out there for people in the real world, in the enterprise, and going into production.
Won't it always be true that we'll need to have a somewhat protracted period to discover the exact correct hardware and storage configuration and networking configuration that is appropriate for my use case, for my workload? Won't we always need that? And won't any kind of out-of-the-box solution still require extensive customization and burning in?
So I think a lot of them will, for your more complicated enterprise ones, even today, if you're putting in an ERP release, that's a known problem. People have been putting those in for decades now. You still have months to be able to put that in, do the tuning and put all that together. So I still think a lot of that will be necessary. But I think over time, you'll have a less number of variables to work with. So today, there's a large number of variables to work with, even within networking or compute, especially within storage, there's many different options to work with. I think over time, those will lessen, and you'll get down to a few different options to work with. And then perhaps even when you see this as rolling out as a service as part of Sahara, there might even be, one or two reference architectures to do that, to lessen that amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
However, having said that, most customers in the enterprise, doing 2 or 3 months to do a pilot, that's a fairly standard time for them to do any pilot. So I don't think that's terribly unnatural for many of them.
So it will get easier, but proof of concepts and pilots will still be de rigueur.
I think so.
And that's no different from any other kind of new infrastructure solution or any kind of solution that's being adopted. People need time to adjust to it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things today is, part of that adjustment for a lot of the enterprises is just adjusting to cloud, because this may be the first time they really use cloud. For our customer that we're working with today, that's true. And so part of this has just been adjusting to cloud instead of their normal IT processes and enterprise infrastructure. Over time, they'll have more experience with just generally with cloud, and so that may lessen the time also.
So it's funny that you say that. You and I have worked together in the past. We're veterans of the cloud market and ecosystem, It might seem funny to us, or maybe even to some of our listeners, that there are companies who don't know what cloud is. How often do you see that? How prevalent is that perception that cloud is something new and it needs to be adjusted to?
I would say it's actually the norm. I think it's difficult living in tech centers like Israel and Silicon Valley and New York and places like that to realize that, in general, outside of those areas, use of the cloud is not extremely prevalent. We spend a lot of time with clients. A lot of it's really education. They've certainly heard of the cloud. They may have used consumer cloud, Dropboxes or some of the Google services and things on that kind of SaaS level.
Hmm.
But a lot of them don't understand what the implications of some of those decisions are lower in the stack around infrastructure as a service or even platform as a service. And so we spend a lot of time around education about what those implications actually are and what those decision points are for them, because it actually is a big change for a lot of them.
What is your attitude? What is Selenia's take on the ecosystem? Are you guys trying to build your own distro of OpenStack, or are you coming in and doing bespoke solutions for each customer separately? How is Selenia approaching this, and what do you think is the right way to do it?
So in general, in the OpenStack ecosystem today, I think there's more than enough distros, and I applaud their work that they've been doing to bring together what really is an open source framework and move that into a product. And I think they've done some great work around some integration of the products together, and hopefully getting across that installation hurdle. And so, in general, Selenia has no desire to go work with that. I think there's more than enough distros out there. We love what Red Hat's doing. We love what some of the other smaller startups are doing around that. And I think there's space for more than a few of those distros out at service providers and enterprises. We really want to help customers adopt that. And so, to us, that's two different things. One is helping them move into open infrastructure around being able to architect solutions for them, help them with their strategies, help them implement those kind of things. And so a lot of it's helping them adopt it. But the other half of that, though, is, once you've adopted it, really being able to operate that and provide, both value to IT and the business. And so we spend a lot of our time and a lot of our efforts really around that management or adoption phase, that once you have this open infrastructure, how are you going to use it? How are you going to manage that? And that's really where we spend most of our time today. And in the future, we'll be spending more and more of our time on that. And that's where we think there's actually a fair amount of, I would say, space to be able to both provide services and products in that space to help people really manage that.
So as far as you're concerned, the distros are making your job easier, but they're not making the end result for the client any closer.
Well, I think they're bringing them part of the way. Before, you used to have to, like when I ran Internet Network Services public cloud, I had to go to source and pull code out of the actual GitHub repositories, package it all, do all of that testing, create my own installation, all of that stuff, just to get to a place where I had a running cloud.
Mhm.
I think the distros are doing a great job of packaging, installation, and such like that. So they're certainly providing great value there. But one of the things I found was, after the 2 to 4 weeks of installing, which were not fun, I still had a year or two of managing that infrastructure, which there weren't a lot of tools around, and there weren't a lot of people to go ask about how do you do certain things.
Mhm.
And that's really where we're focusing much more of our efforts around software development and consulting, which is how would you actually manage that infrastructure? How would you provide solutions on top of it so that you're providing, what the client or the enterprise really wants, which is big data or being able to roll out applications faster or to have more consistent desktops.
One last question, Ken. If you were to talk to the Israeli audience at the upcoming OpenStack Israel event on June 2nd, knowing that it's after the summit in Georgia in late May, what message would you want to tell them?
So, I think there's two messages there, which is A, the OpenStack ecosystem is still a vibrant place, and there's a lot of areas there to innovate. And I think we can see a lot of places to innovate. I've just heard about, within the last week or two, of people doing really interesting low latency OpenStack clouds out in Asia. And because something completely different than what a lot of my clients are looking at. And so I see that there's a huge amount of innovation still happening there. and there's a huge opportunity to participate there. And so, that's one of the messages that I think you're going to see loud and clear come out of the summit. The second part of it is, though, that OpenStack is really open for business for enterprises. And I think more and more people should be looking at how is OpenStack and private clouds going to fit into their overall computing strategy as they move forward. I don't doubt that customers in the enterprise will be using public clouds, and I absolutely think not only will they should, but I think there's also a element there of you want to keep some of that computing infrastructure in-house for them. And so as they look forward, how does OpenStack fit into their enterprise architecture plans as part of a hybrid cloud? And what are the steps they're going to take to start adopting that infrastructure as they look forward to that strategy?
All right, so you're throwing down the gauntlet on two challenges there. Number one, innovate. Number two, if you're an enterprise, make plans to have OpenStack.
I think, Israel being one of those places where you've got a lot of development going on and a lot of high tech, I think you certainly have both of those challenges.
I agree. Ken, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for being a guest on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's been great talking with you again.
Take care.
Thanks.